Hey man, hopefully you're doing well. It's been a while.
It has.
Solana has been riding the struggle bus, as they say. HyperLiquid taking a lot of the air out of the room. Now, some people are saying HyperLiquid is the Solana killer, but it could be argued that HyperLiquid not competing as much with Solana as it is with Base. What do you think?
I actually hadn't thought about the base angle. I'm going to say this. So I'm luckily for guys like us that are chain agnostic, you don't have to pick one or the other. Yeah, I always think it's funny. People on crypto Twitter are like, oh, .eth, they're all Ethereum or
Right.
they're all Solana. When then you talk to people in the real world, I don't know if you ever do that, but occasionally I leave the house and talk to people in the real world, and increasingly I can find people who actually care about crypto in the real world. And most of them will be like, oh yeah, I'm holding some Sol, some ETH. Like, most people in the world are not, they just want to win. And so luckily you can play both. And I've been playing both as well. I would say those are my two biggest positions at the moment. But I view actually HyperLiquid, bold prediction, I view it as the Binance killer.
Yeah, well, I
The
mean, that makes sense.
Binance killer.
It is like competing in that sex dex or sex perp dex space for sure.
Because here's the theory. Here's my thesis on it. So you've got more and more activity already moving on chain, even absent HyperLiquid. Clear that Coinbase sees that's the way things are going with Base, and I could see, in that sense, okay, so maybe HyperLiquid is competing with Base. But if you look at the amount of this crypto bull run to this point that's happened on chain, I would argue it's more, significantly more, and I think the numbers back this up. It's more than happened in previous bull runs, where you have, for example, a lot of the big winners are meme coins that were traded primarily on DEXs rather than things that were, it used to be, okay, like wait to see what's listed on Coinbase, wait to see what's listed on Binance, and that's going to be the winner. So you already got all those new traders who are going straight to on-chain. When those people at some point some of them start trading perps, which is easier? Saying, okay, go now back to an exchange, or your wallet that you're already using, plug that into a DEX, and you can trade perps on there. So I think HyperLiquid has found a good solution to that, in that they basically built what has been an app chain. It will be a full-fledged layer 1 at some point, but they've built this app chain that's actually able to support a DEX with on par performance to a centralized exchange. And so I view it as like the Binance killer. I've heard the Sol killer thesis as well, and I mean, I guess I see the argument, right? I mean, HyperLiquid has gone, much further than Sol in terms of not being decentralized, and so that, if people really truly don't care about that, because HyperLiquid last, I think they have 4 validators. Is that it?
4, yeah,
4, yeah. Whereas Solana, last I checked, they had around 1,000, maybe more now. So Solana is actually, it's not even really the same scale, right? You can say Ethereum and Bitcoin are, of course, more decentralized, but it's not really even the same scale in terms of something like HyperLiquid versus Solana. So if you're going to argue that your average retail person just doesn't care, then okay, maybe the solution is to have a chain that doesn't even claim to be decentralized.
right. Yeah, it's not a decentralized chain or ecosystem. It's an on-chain ecosystem that is, let's just say, it's relatively permissionless, and you could say relatively trustless, but it's not trying to be, a major L1. It's trying to be a Binance competitor. It's trying to be an on-chain DEX. Let's talk about that for a second, because DYDX tried that. Hey, why didn't DYDX succeed, or why is HyperLiquid being dramatically successful where previous attempts at this failed?
One thing could be it's the right time.
Sure.
Could be it's an idea whose time has come. I mean, you can look at, for example, with prediction markets, right? There were people who tried prediction markets 3 years ago, didn't get the same traction that Polymarket got, and that's one case, right? It could be an idea whose time has come. The other thing could be, I mean, execution does matter, right? It's if ideas could make you a success, then we'd all be a success, because everyone has a good idea at some point. But it's really execution that makes the difference. The other thing could be, I think, DYDX, of course, it was not its own app chain. Now it's app chain on Cosmos. could be HyperLiquid's. I mean, this would have to do with execution, but the onboarding via Arbitrum is better than onboarding to DYDX. Sorry, did I say HyperLiquid was app chain? I meant DYDX is Cosmos app chain. Yeah, so it could be the onboarding.
But you can onboard on DYDX through EVM chains now. I mean, maybe you couldn't historically. That might have been a big thing. But depositing USDC from various chains. I mean, they've really upped let's just say the user experience on DYDX. I forget what version they're on now. They're like on V4 or something.
Yeah, I don't use DYDX, so I guess I
I know, but they have the Mega Vault, which is one thing that I think is relatively interesting in the DYDX ecosystem. It's like competing with HLP, which actually, I don't know how much you know about HLP. I'd like to look into that more. So there are these things in DeFi. I coined the term CPV. I'm trying to make it stick. I hope it does. Counterparty vaults, right? And they're really fascinating tools or instruments. Anyone who doesn't know, they're effectively just like you are being the house and everyone else is the gambler. So when they lose, you win. When they win, you lose, and you're raking in fees the entire time. So it's really over a long enough time horizon, it should be a winning play. HyperLiquid has HLP. Jupiter has JLP. The sort of OG of the big ones is GLP from GMX, and DYDX sort of took a note from Gaines trade. If any of you guys remember that, they're still alive, and I do like them. Shout out to Ross. But they have Megavault. Megavault has been churning out like 50% APR for a while recently because DYDX said, we're going to take half of all of the fees we generate as a chain and just push them into this thing to subsidize it for the first few whiles. And so that's been a pretty decent play, and I hope they get some traction there. But it reminds me of the SummerFi versus Contango trajectory. So Contango was an $8 million, protocol, and that was with the levered AUM at the beginning of the year. Now they're, I don't know, a few hundred million, maybe even close to $500 million. SummerFi started the year around 4 billion and is going to end the year around 4 billion. Maybe it's 2 billion, but it's something like that. They have had relatively low change. Contango is remarkably fast to onboard new markets, to onboard new leveraging opportunities, and just super reactive team. SummerFi is super slow to do that exact same thing. Now, does that mean SummerFi is safer or more like robust, or like is there some inherent good in slowness? Maybe. But Contango is going to attract all the people looking for those new opportunities. And I think there's something similar to be said about DYDX versus HyperLiquid, where HyperLiquid is just super quick to ship these new things.
That's a good theory. That's a good theory. I'm thinking back even to fall. This is the first time I used HyperLiquid. Fall of 23, early fall, maybe even late summer. Friendtech launched, and HyperLiquid launched this thing you could buy that was like a index for how Friendtech shares were doing, was before they had launched a token. And to me, it was like, okay, so this is something I actually cannot trade anywhere else. And usually, I'll say anything. Usually, that's a canary in the coal mine for any sort of new app. Is, does the app let you do something that you cannot do anywhere else? And that was a point. It's like, I don't really, it's kind of inconvenient to onboard to this thing that's, you have to go to Arbitrum and send USDC, but I'm going to do it anyways because I can only trade this there. I can't do it anywhere else.
So speaking of the pre-market sort of ecosystem, we had Whales, which seemed incredibly promising at the beginning of the points frenzy. And then Whales has kind of lost favor because they had to cancel a bunch of markets. They had to refund people multiple times just because of the way that points ended up turning into tokens. The HyperLiquid one was one of the most, I would say, vitriolic, because people were purchasing these points at, $10 a point, $9 a point, $5 a point if they bought them at the right time. Now these points are worth like $150 per point in retrospect. So imagine that multiplier. They, if I remember correctly, they had to kick back the collateral on both sides for some reason that was unknown to me. And thinking about the pre-market space, do you have an opinion on where you think the winner will be? I've noticed HyperLiquid has sort of stopped doing pre-markets.
I think that's telling that they've, one of the fastest growing, most popular apps at the moment has decided that it's not worth doing pre-markets. I mean, the challenges for points trading specifically, I mean, I can, futures type contracts is different, but the problem with trading points is that most protocols don't do a linear airdrop based on points. So someone's got which I guess should be reflected in the price, but for whatever reason, it seems like it often isn't. So you've got one person's got 500,000 points and someone else has 5 million points. And then the 5 million points, you might think, okay, they should be selling for 10x the 500,000, but they really shouldn't, because most protocols do some sort of
whale cap.
Yeah,
Right.
whale cap. They do some sort of like stair logarithmic type thing where at some point, the more points you have, the allocation goes up slower and slower. And so I think that has killed some of the pre-market type things, because again, it should be reflected in the price in theory, but it can be dependent so much on how they choose to do their allocation. And then you could also imagine some of the teams, how they choose to do the allocation could be affected by how the points markets were doing.
Well, so yes, 100%. This is also why Kelp's KEP, I think, failed tremendously. I was really heavy into KEP. I thought KEP was a fantastic, phenomenal product. I was LPing it for a long time. For those who don't know, KEP was tokenized Eigen points for season 1. And what this was anticipated to be one of the biggest airdrops of the year, and being able to purchase, buy, sell them, and speculate on them with a totally fungible token was great. However, because Eigen didn't tell anyone when the snapshot was going to be, people were trading these season 1 points, buying and earning and generating these season 1 points after season 1 had ended by a few months, which created a huge kerfuffle after the fact, and KEP effectively died, and people got some sort of semi-satisfactory amount of points thereafter, basically getting a haircut of whatever additional mint there was. So that was kind of a bummer. But Rumple has come in and said, you know what, we're gonna try the same thing. We're gonna redo this entire playbook. And I was initially hesitant, but the difference here is they're working with the teams directly to say, hey, please, we need to know when you're gonna have a snapshot, or else we can't make fungible versions of your asset. It's just not viable. For the same reason that KEP sort of faltered. And they even said that if there is a KEP-like situation, we'll probably do something semi-similar, which is you will get the value of your points up until that day, and there will be some sort of menial haircut. Luckily, they are working really close with all these teams. In that same arena, I think that pre-launch tokens are very interesting, whereas tokenized points are very risky for the reasons you said. Pre-launch tokens have also sort of, I would say, which is really weird, moved from the decentralized exchanges like Avo and like HyperLiquid to the centralized exchanges. I'm seeing more pre-launch markets on like Bybit and KuCoin than I am on Avo and Hyper now.
That is an interesting phenomenon. Huh.
And
I
it's a
actually
mixture.
don't have a good thought initially on why. I mean, I can imagine why the exchanges would launch it. So maybe it's just the fact that now the exchanges have it, and so naturally the DEXs are going to lose market share, right? It's going to go back to parity. But yeah, I don't know if I have a good explanation on why people would prefer. I mean, other than the reasons people prefer centralized exchanges always, right? Which usually has to do with liquidity or even security in some cases.
I think there's probably some demand for it. I also know that a lot of these centralized exchanges are getting allocations. Maybe there's like this additional desire. They want to hedge before anyone else can hedge. There's like a first mover advantage there. I know many people hedged their usual airdrop on Bybit, for example, or the Zirkit airdrop on Bybit. And the way those tend to work is actually semi-similar to whales, which is you have to over-collateralize your short position or your sell. And sometimes they only give you, a span of 8 hours or less to settle that once the airdrop happens. So you better be there when it goes live. And that's been kind of scary for some of the LPs that we work with. Help is finally going to launch. Well, let me not say they're going to launch token, because that's like the most cursed thing you can say about Kelp. Kelp has said Q1, they're going to finally launch. They've listed the total amount of tokens. Did you do any participation in any Kelp farming?
No, I didn't do any of that. Maybe a while ago, not recently. I truthfully have been not doing very much with ETH at all in recent months.
How dare you? You said you were chain agnostic.
Really in the past year. Yeah, I'm chain agnostic. I use Ethereum related chains. I'd be lying if I said I was a huge fan of the asset. To me, it's like I like the barbell of Bitcoin versus something like Sol or Hype, where you've got the one that's the most adoption, most secure. This is why we need to have these good discussions, right? Because they have different perspectives. I like Bitcoin, most adoption, most secure, and then you've got the fastest, most retail activity heavy chains. And to me, I know I'm sacrilege right now, but to me, it's tough to find a place for ETH in the portfolio.
Yeah, and I was wondering how people were going to feel about this because Bitcoin is arguably better by almost every single metric. If you look at the price action versus ETH, it's baked into the chart. You can see that people prefer Bitcoin. There's just way more buy pressure on it than there has been on ETH. My counter argument has always been, but Bitcoin doesn't have any yield. So if you can get, if you're airdrop farming, if you got Eigen, if you got Ether5 Season 1, if you got Renzo Season 1, if you got all of these AVS points that might precipitate into something in the future, then probably you are beating the price action of Bitcoin and you have something to do, which, can satisfy the inner yield farmer in a lot of us. That was true for like the first half of the cycle. The second half of the cycle, Bitcoin yields have existed. You have eBTC with Ether5. You have Solve BTC, which is actually a really fascinating asset. The one on Solana is one I might even want to talk about here. That's generating like 20% APR. Now that you have what has been sort of coined BTC-Fi, it's been a harder sell to hold ETH versus Bitcoin because ETH's major selling point was you can do stuff with it. If you can do stuff with Bitcoin, ETH's major holding point sort of evaporates.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still a case to be made that ETH has native yield, which is, Bitcoin does not have.
Sure.
To me, I mean, it's one of those things. I would never begrudge someone for holding ETH, but the market, if you look at ETH BTC, I feel like the market is showing that there's been more demand for BTC. The one thing that started to make me change my mind recently, do you know what that is?
Vitalik dumped his girlfriend.
I didn't. Is that true? I don't know that.
I don't know that's true.
But what started to make me change my mind and consider going back into ETH is that the ETF flows for ETH have picked up massively.
Oh, that's right.
Where they were negative almost every single day for months, and then in recent weeks they've turned very strongly positive again. Or really, I should say very strongly positive, period. And to me, that's like showing that, okay, maybe there's starting to be some institutional demand. Maybe it wasn't there right when they launched like it was with Bitcoin, but there's starting to be some either institutional or, demand from non-crypto natives to actually invest in ETH.
There's a narrative that, finance will be built on chain. It's almost an inevitability at this point. I think people are just saying when we have the president who's, market buying Aave and all these other sort of DeFi aligned assets. I think he was buying Maple too, which is kind of cool. There any number of sort of like traditional ETH aligned assets. And so the argument that I've always heard is finance is coming on chain. It's coming on chain in a big way. It's going to happen. It's an inevitability. When that happens, it's going to be built on Ethereum. That is Ethereum's major narrative. And in some way, just because of name brand recognition, place recognition, people will associate ETH as ETH is DeFi. DeFi is where finance is going to happen in the future. Therefore, ETH good. Do you think that's true? And do you think there are any competitors like HyperLiquid, Solana? I don't think HyperLiquid is going to compete in that space, but HyperLiquid or Solana or other alt L1s that may end up winning in the long run?
Yeah. So, I mean, anything besides Solana is going to be very far from being competitive in terms of any metrics right now. And that's not to say that there won't be, but for example, if you just look at like top chains by any metric, TVL, volume, the only one that really even comes close in terms of the ones that come close in terms of any of those metrics, I'm just reading the numbers here, so
Base?
Don't like hate me. Well, Base I would consider part of Ethereum,
right?
It's a layer two, but would be Tron and Binance Smart Chain are the only like other layer ones that actually come close in terms of those metrics.
Yep.
I don't think the future of finance, at least not in the United States, is going to be built on either of those. I mean, maybe in other parts of the world, I can see there being fintech apps on Tron that take off since they have a lot of payment activity. But even there, I believe that Solana and others are gaining market share in terms of payments. So, if something else could overtake it, I think that one of the lessons this cycle for me was I always kind of had the mentality that other layer ones will have very strong periods of bullishness and that you should take advantage of those, but that, we would nothing would ever really come close to Ethereum, at least not in the foreseeable future. The past year, we've seen Solana flip Ethereum on several key metrics several times. Fees generated by their applications, volume, it's those two to name them specifically.
Okay, but let's talk about those vanity metrics.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about I would say one of those, volume can be a vanity metric. I think that I'll let me finish and then we'll get back to the metrics. So the fact specifically that fees flipped, which is fees not on the chain, spent the chain, but on all the applications on the chain, flipped Ethereum last month. To me, that shows, okay, so like Ethereum's lead is actually not insurmountable because Ethereum is far ahead in TVL, partially because of the higher price right now. But if you, for example, I think if you had more people paying fees on a different chain for an extended period of time, people are not just going to leave capital idle on a chain where it could be used more productively elsewhere. So that's basically showing me I don't think it's inevitable that Ethereum overtakes it. However, I think the time for any competitors to catch up is running short. I think, Solana has its own issues and Solana has not caught up yet. But Solana has made the best shot at it. Some of these other newer ones, Sui, HyperLiquid, Avalanche is not necessarily newer, but is also a top chain. Their time to actually catch up and compete with Ethereum to have things built in their ecosystem is, optimistically, I would say they, you only have a couple more years before things start getting solidified. That will be tough to unsolidify.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. My counter to what I'll call the vanity metrics of volume and fees, which the two things are effectively the same. They're highly correlated positively. It's because of the volume there's so many fees generated. And why are there so many fees generated on Solana? It's because you have, but you probably know, high fee tiers for liquidity pools of meme coin frenzy. That's my assumption as to why it's generating so many fees. And the meme coin frenzy is driving most of the vanity metrics on Solana. If you took away pump.fund and related products, I wonder what the metrics on Solana would look like and if they would still be as competitive.
That is a good point. I think, the counter to that is, how much of Ethereum's meteoric rise or Ethereum DeFi's meteoric rise in 2020 and 2021 was things that were similarly frivolous. I mean, you had the legit applications that were underpinning it all, right? You had Uniswap, you had Aave, and all of that. But how much of the actual driving of users was first by people farming derivative Ponzi's in summer 2020, and then was, there was a massive meme coin frenzy also in spring of 2021, and speculation is one of the use cases of crypto, and so yes, Solana I would say is more retail heavy. Like before, I talked about liking that barbell of Bitcoin for institutional adoption, that's Solana for retail. But if that's what if having basically what's essentially games, toys, gambling built on a chain actually bootstraps it with users and liquidity, is that really so bad?
Okay, well, that's a good question. I think it's not one that is rhetorical either. So I'm looking at Solana right now on DeFi Llama. Shout out to the llamas. You could probably guess what the top 4 fee generating apps are. If I said number 1, what do you think it's going to be?
Number 1 is probably going to be Radium.
Yeah, exactly. And Radium, in my opinion, because of Pump.Fun, because of all of the memes that go from Pump.Fun and then eventually pushed into some sort of Radium LP. So number 1 is Radium not by far. It's actually, there's a close second and third. 3.66 million over 24 hours. Now, this is a Monday when we're recording this, so it's kind of unfair because there's typically low volume and low fees over the weekend, especially during a holiday season. Number 2, this kind of surprised me, but this is the Lido of Solana, so Jito. Now, I'm assuming those fees, correct me if I'm wrong, are just like the revenue taken off the top of the staking yield for the LST. Is that your...
It's not solely that. Jito also does MEV.
MEV, okay, cool. So that's
MEV.
awesome.
So I'm going to boost your point. It is actually, in part related to the trading activity because Jito also does MEV.
Right, okay. So top two things potentially related to the trading activity. And then the third one is Solana, the chain asset. I don't fully understand that one, actually.
So that would be fees paid for transactions.
Oh, okay. Well, that's actually pretty impressive. And then, because it's a really cheap and fast chain. And then the fourth one is what you would expect also to be there, which is Pump.Fun. And then everything sort of after that doesn't generate over $1 million of fees over the 24 hours. Again, it's a Monday, kind of unfair to say that. But those things alone, if the entire activity, or at least not the entire activity, but if the vast majority of the activity is only speculating on memes, one, you may have a branding issue because you don't want to be stuck with that only. And I agree that DeFi summer, every chain was the Ponzi chain. Effectively, ETH may have been like the Aave curve convex chain as well. Arbitrum was the GMX chain at one point in time, but before the GMX chain, it was like the hamburger chain. It was some ridiculous like Arby's Ponzi nonsense. And then Polygon was a semi-reputable chain for a while. And then no one used it. And then Binance Smart Chain was a hellscape of forks, just absolutely Ponzi central. So maybe like the branding can change over time. Absolutely, definitely. I'm not as convinced by the vanity metrics that you're talking about as maybe someone who's more Solana aligned. And I will admit my bias. I am more of an EVM maxi than a Solana maxi. I think JLP is the breakout asset of this cycle. I'm a huge proponent of JLP. But that doesn't mean that I'm like a Solana maxi. I think Camino is one of the coolest products on Solana and even like DeFi in general. But I don't use Solana that much.
Yeah, so I guess I'll give a caveat also that bias is disclosed. I have a grant from the Solana Foundation, not to talk about price, it's to make educational materials. But I've been using HyperLiquid more than Solana recently. So it's not like I'm married to the chain, and I also use Base and other chains very heavily. What I would, people have to make their own decisions here, and this isn't to say that necessarily it's reflected in price immediately, but my question would be, is it, two questions. First, is it so bad that so much of the activity is based on memes? And second, what does it say about the demand for the rest of DeFi if people using this one app, Pump.Fun, and memes that came from it can generate more volume than everything on Ethereum mainnet? What does that say about the demand for trading on there?
That's a great question. I would say that Pump.Fun, mimetic trading, all of that is meant to be hyper fast paced. You don't care about the fees because who cares about a 1% swap fee when you're speculating on 1,000x or whatever, like you're willing to, you don't even consider the 1%. Whereas if you're swapping ETH to USDC, or if you're swapping, Curve to DAI, that 1%, you would never pay 1% to swap those two assets. You're looking for, a 1 BIP, maybe 10 BIP fee to your pool to do that transaction. So the fees inherently are going to be way less, and the frequency is going to be remarkably less. I would say there's nothing wrong with, let's just say you look at stock exchanges and you have a stock exchange where people are long-term holding. They're trying to avoid the tax implications of holding for less than a year. So they're buying and holding these sort of advanced assets or investment vehicles, and they're doing it long-term. That doesn't mean that like that exchange is worse or bad, because there's also this little penny stock exchange that is generating tons of fees and tons of volume. Does that mean the penny stock exchange is better? And that like that's where the real excitement and like that's the future of finance? No, it's just that's the penny stock exchange, and this is a different instrument, a different ecosystem full of different customers, different people.
That's a good point, and I'm going to say something I don't know the numbers on it because it's an example that you brought up, but I would guess in those cases the penny stock is not still generating more volume than say the New York Stock Exchange, right?
Sure, yeah, that's fair.
So I guess my question is, what does it say about the thesis that like actual
Use.
financial applications that will go mainstream are being built on Ethereum if they cannot even generate more volume or fees than people trading basically these jokes on chain.
Well, it comes back to
and that's more of an existential question, right?
Yeah.
It's like maybe we're further out from that happening than we think.
I think that the counter, which is kind of a boring counter and kind of a cop-out counter, is, well, L2s are Ethereum. And then you can roll all of the volume from all of the L2s back into Ethereum and say, see, we are still winning and blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. The ratio is not very good.
I actually think that's a good way to think about it. I mean, because again, it's, I'm not a chain max. I do think that's like a fair way to think about it. There are definitely some, I think maybe swept under the rug longer term questions of if I think Base probably has the most traction in terms of building interesting. Arbitrum has a lot as well, but recently I think I've seen more interesting things on Base. So say Base has the most traction recently in terms of getting both money and new applications on there. What does, like, I think I consider that part of the Ethereum ecosystem, as I think one should, but I don't think activity on Base is equally valued to the ETH as an asset as it would be on mainnet.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, if we're talking
especially now that Base is starting to push paying transaction fees in USDC.
Yeah. Yeah. This is an excellent argument. What is value accrual back to, like, the big asset, the coin of the chain? That's a tough sell, because fees and, ultrasound money hasn't really worked out for ETH the way that people thought it would. And I mean, at some points it is semi-deflationary, which is really cool. I think that's a great narrative. But yeah, by vanity metrics alone, I don't think that means ETH is going to go up multiple X's, which is unfortunate, because I'm a huge ETH bag holder. I would love for that to be the case. I think
it could happen if you actually built, you onboarded 100 million people to Base, 1 billion people to Base. That would translate down to the base layer at some point.
Hey, if you onboard 1 billion people into Base, then I'm a happy camper.
That's the goal.
Regardless.
I think that's the goal. Look at
that's what I'm
look at Coinbase's master plan. It was published, I think, almost 10 years ago at this point.
The next billion users.
Have you seen that?
I've seen it on every front page of every DeFi application that I've ever clicked on.
Yeah, so Coinbase,
more realistic with Coinbase.
Coinbase published something. It's called Coinbase's master plan, and basically, their master plan was, first they build an exchange, and I don't have it in front of me, but it was something like, the exchange is to get tens of millions of users, and it's a place to trade assets. Then they build a wallet to like custody interface with applications, and that's how you get to hundreds of millions. And then it was like, to get to 1 billion, you build a platform that other people build applications on. And to me, it seems like they haven't explicitly said this. It seems like Base is the final step in that plan, where that's the platform to actually build applications on. And that's how they own the entire vertical stack, from onboarding to wallet to applications.
And credit to Coinbase, they've onboarded more users than probably anything else. I'll give them that. The my counter, my sort of bear case, the inner cynic in me, and I hate to be a cynic, but says, how many actual DeFi users are there? I remember there was a sort of a mimetic number going around the last bull cycle that was like, there are really only 4,000 farmers, like people in the trenches. And that number has probably exploded now. And if you count meme coin traders on Radium and Pump.fun, it's actually probably a pretty high number. But I would be very surprised if there were 1 million users who understood DeFi at a decent level, that have a 6-figure portfolio or higher.
Yeah, no, a 6-figure portfolio, I'd be shocked.
But if you go into TradFi, you would see that, I don't know, like, very easily. So let's just say over $100 portfolio. Let's be very, very basic. People who are active users, let's just say touching DeFi twice a week on chain with over $100 of addressable capital. How many of those users do you think there are?
Are we counting people who are just trading?
Sure. Yeah, that's fair.
Somewhere between, I would guess, someone's going to come in the comments and like actually have the number, but I would guess 300,000 to 1 million.
Okay, I was going to say around the same thing. I think it's probably less than 1 million, but like approaching that number, and that is nowhere near where like Coinbase's goals and metrics are. So if they're going to bring on 1 billion, that's a factor of 1,000 difference. I don't think Coinbase Wallet has brought in that many people. I think maybe it's onboarded a few people who were scared to use MetaMask or scared to use Rabby. Probably don't. If you don't know what MetaMask is, you probably don't know what Rabby is. So Solana has onboarded way more people with Phantom this cycle than Coinbase has with their wallet. And so I am skeptical of Coinbase's long-term goal. I'm skeptical that the average person is willing to go on chain. This is kind of a sad story. Recently, one of my community members like has this sweet old lady, 70-year-old. She got scammed for like her life savings, not even on chain. It was some like TradFi-esque scam. They pretended to be her bank and they had her send her money, 350K, but they off-ramped it with crypto, which is why sort of I got involved. And it went through, your usual tornado type mixer, and it's a huge bummer. She will never look at on-chain data. She will never spin up a wallet. She can't understand what happened to her. I will say that there are a lot of people who are not willing to do the intellectual lift to spin up a wallet unless they see that potential for rich. Like, I think a lot of people who are on board this cycle said, I see it on TikTok, I see it on Twitter, someone just made $1 million out of $10. That could be me. That's what gives you the motivation to overcome the difficulty of onboarding.
Yes, but what does that say about
what's the point? It's a good question.
Oh yeah, what does that say about crypto being the future of finance in general? Then we can maybe move on to some of the other topics we had for today.
What does it mean? I mean, most people that I talk to in this space are ex-TradFi, or I would say like already somewhat heterodoxic, probably like your nerdy kids. Did you see this is kind of tangential. Did you see the post about Gate Kids?
With the headphones and the
headphones and the fluoride drinks and the little cards and the tangrams. I think a lot of people on Twitter, I don't know like that much about the Gate stuff. We called it AIG where I was. Did you probably participated in something similar to that when you were a kid?
Yeah, I was in something similar. I mean, I couldn't tell, whether people were just like LARPing, like, oh, brought back all these like suppressed memories. Because I do remember, we had like the test and we had to get the, like the audio and different, the tonal things and look at all the cards and being like, that one comes next. And then they like added this, afterwards they added this, well, they had me and one other kid in the school. They skipped both of us two grades in math. And then there was like a special class I went to once a week. But like, I mostly remember it being like boring. I don't remember anything special there. We like talked about, like interesting stuff that was supposed to be like other kids weren't ready for, but I don't remember it being anything that crazy.
Groundbreaking or like MK Ultra. Well, that's because you forgot all of the training. They did the brainwashing at the, I'm kidding. But yeah, we got to go to Langley, which is kind of cool. I was too young to appreciate it. I think you do all the cool stuff when you're too young to appreciate it. But anyways, I think a lot of CT falls into that like Gate Kid or Gate Kid adjacent people, which is a very small demographic overall. So maybe the goal shouldn't be to onboard the next billion users. Maybe the goal should be to onboard the next $1 trillion or $1 trillion of addressable capital, which is a much easier, and I think much easier lift, because everyone who I've talked to and of course I have like survivor bias. I'm only talking to people who stayed in this space, but everyone I've talked to who came from TradFi is over the moon about how well DeFi functions. I've heard mixed stories like, back when I was a stock trader, we all worked together. DeFi is really competitive. I heard the exact opposite, saying, man, I'm amazed by how well everyone works together in DeFi, and TradFi was so cutthroat. So I don't know how those stories, but the user experience across the board has been remarkably better for all of these folks.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I think, here's the thing. Most people don't own stocks.
Right.
Most people don't own bonds unless it's through a bank where they deposit their money and indirectly get some sort of interest, but they're not directly going out and buying bonds. Most people will never, if this hurts you, most people will never provide liquidity on a DEX, vast majority, probably 99% of people. 99% of people, they won't, maybe not 99, large percentage of people will never buy some sort of token on chain. But you could argue that they might buy some sort of other asset that's represented by a token that like they don't care that it's actually tracked on crypto. I mean, the example people always use is games. I mean, that hasn't fully played out yet, but you could have sort of in-game assets and that's going to be tracked on chain. You could have there's the everything will be tokenized idea that like, all sorts of ownership will be tracked on chain. And in that case, I think once you get to that point, they're not going to necessarily even be spinning up a wallet. They'll be using some kind of application that does it all for them. Kind of like how Premarket, people were onboarding it to directly to it. People who didn't normally care about crypto, they just wanted to buy, shares of Trump win or whatever people are going to say in debates. And I think that's probably where a lot of things are going to look. However, here's my question to you. So if you were building an app, you have two considerations. First is where are there existing users that might be sort of already crypto native in some sense, in the sense that they've used it before, maybe not like they're active on Twitter, but they've used it before. Where are those people so that you can easily onboard them? And also which chain is the best infrastructure to build your app on? And so one is like, it's like the tech, the users versus the tech. So which has the best tech to build it? And that is probably like a better opportunity for smaller up and coming chains. I'm just going to pick up one, but something like Sui, that it's like, okay, people might say it's proven enough, and maybe for some developers it works to build their app on. But then if you say, okay, we want crypto native people, where are they going to go? And that's, sorry to bring it back to it, but that's where I think, Solana has a good advantage because they already have the huge mind share in terms of people who are these retail traders. And if you're building some other thing for people to speculate on, where are you going to have a easier time getting users?
Well, let's talk tailwinds for Solana, because I'm semi-convinced by this idea. It's been said before that, ETH brought onboard a ton of people. ETH and L2s onboarded the majority of last cycle's new users with Ponzi's and nodes and crazy high APRs and food farms and, the promise of riches through yield, which is kind of a promise that doesn't exist anymore. Yields are much more conservative. Strategies are more big. I would say that now it's more like your 5 to 9 figure investor actually that's playing on EVM land and trying to sort of like juice all of these yields and airdrop farm and this and that. It's not really bringing in the new user. The new user is not particularly interested in yield farming, which breaks my heart, but it's just a truth. It's a truism. All of the new users are flocking to Solana. So now you have, as you mentioned, this gigantic base of new users on Solana, not really there in like a Hotel California situation, but like they're stuck there, and they really are only doing one thing, which is meme coin trading. I'd say that's not because that's the only thing that they want to do. I would say it's because it's a relatively small ecosystem, which means that it is a ripe ecosystem for development. It's a ripe ecosystem for like drawing these new users into something else that could be interesting, into something else that is one step less, let's just say, degenerate, but still fun and exciting and money producing. JLP has been a great thing for that. Leveraging JLP, maybe also pretty great, doing it through Camino, doing it through MarginFi, doing it even on Drift, using some yield-bearing assets as margin. I think SUSDE you could use that on Drift. I think that Solana, for new builders of DeFi applications that could be a bit spicy, like Solana needs a Ponzi season. They've had their meme coin season. I think they need DeFi applications that produce outsized return season, even if it's only going to get meme coin people to then just play with DeFi applications a bit more.
I could see that because what they need people to lock up more. They need people to like deposit more funds into DeFi, and especially, I would say Solana's weakest point, if we're talking about metrics, Solana's weakest point has always been and still is stablecoins. There's far fewer stablecoins on Solana than one would expect given the size of the chain. I think what Solana needs is, there are some people who have tried to build this, but they need like their version of Curve to actually gain traction, which for whatever reason, I've got some ideas, but it has not happened so far. They also need a CDP. That's their, there's some people who are working on it, and MakerDAO DAO or Sky, I guess, is actually deploying on Solana. But they need their own version of a CDP as well to have a crypto native stablecoin with liquidity.
Camino had one before they were Camino. It was an M word protocol. Do you remember the name of Camino before it was Camino?
Oh, I must have, either blocked it from my memory or I think it might be a situation where I like missed the. I'm sure you say the name, I'd recognize it.
Mm-hmm.
I must have missed the rebrand where I just thought it was a new protocol.
There was MUSD and then USDM. There was two competing products. Camino allowed you to auto leverage through Solana. Solana is now Save, and that was its major use case. And so eventually they sort of automated these products with Camino and did a bunch of strategy. I forget what it was called, but these two competitors, USDM and MUSD, were both CDPs. They were both like, you mint these stablecoins against positions. And they didn't really take off because it was the wrong time. And I think that one other thing that may have been the wrong time was the Metaverse. So I was going to say that the Metaverse might be one of these things. It's similar to gaming, which is going to onboard a lot of people. Maybe like you log in with your email, you log in with your Facebook, you log in with whatever, and a wallet is spun up for you on the back end, totally unbeknownst to you. And you can load it through TradFi and then interact with it through TradFi. It just wasn't the right time. Last cycle was not the right time for the Metaverse, but maybe that time is coming as reality becomes much more dystopic.
Maybe. Well, if we're going to talk about Metaverse, I'll say probably the thing that makes me most bullish on Metaverse is the fact that Zuckerberg
AI?
is well, AI maybe. I was going to say the fact that Zuckerberg is so heavy on it. You talk about kind of the tech giants. Facebook is one of the only ones that's still founder led. And so the fact that he's making this big bet on Metaverse and VR tech that doesn't really appeal much to me so far, but maybe that changes at some point. The fact that he's making this big bet on that tells me like, okay, that's probably something that's worth paying attention to in the future.
Metaverse seems like, or betting on Metaverse seems like shorting reality. It seems like effectively saying that reality will become so unbearable for the youths or for some demographic that escapism will blow up. That Dadaism, whatever it might be, sort of like this feeling of disenfranchisement or this feeling of wanting to escape, this feeling. I mean, even with the sort of rise of identity politics, you can kind of see this, which is, I don't want to identify as what I might be physically. I don't want to identify with this reality. I don't want to, I would love to identify as like a dear person who's a billionaire and has a giant mansion. And you can do, like, you literally can do that in the Metaverse. There's a fascinating movie called The Congress. Highly recommend watching it. It's a French-Israeli movie, but it's in English. So go ahead and seriously go watch that movie. It's about these actors and actresses, and they all get 3D scanned because people just want to use the rights to their image. And this has actually happened now in reality. And so they can be in whatever movies after they die. And I think we've already had a few actors who've signed on to do this, which is kind of funky. And at the end of the movie, like they go into the Metaverse and all these people are just using avatars and floating around and flying around and sort of like enjoying their lives in this sort of Metaverse reality. This movie was made decades ago. And anyways, I do think that's going to happen. I do think that people will at some point prefer the Matrix over to reality. And by the Matrix, I literally just mean like a reality where you can do whatever you want, right? Like going into some open world and playing with your friends. I don't mean it in any like philosophical, the Matrix. I'm not Andrew Tating it over here. So there is certainly a market for it. And as technology gets more robust, as AI can generate an entire scenescape or castle for you or whatever you want, and as processing and compute becomes affordable and cheap and fast, I could see people running to this, especially as, and we could talk about the macro here, as income inequality sort of continues to get exacerbated, there would be a desire to access things that are otherwise inaccessible for relatively cheap. I know that that's a very tangential thought.
It's interesting. If you consider Metaverse to be synonymous. Well, I was going to say, if you consider Metaverse to be synonymous with VR and AR and those things, there's an interesting asymmetric play there, because my understanding is that VR right now is in the wilderness, maybe in a way comparable to how crypto was a couple of years ago, or maybe even prior to 2020. Now, I'm not in the industry, so this is secondhand. My understanding is, for example, a lot of VR startups have difficulty getting funded right now. That it's just compared to other technologies like AI, or even now, you have a lot of demand for stablecoin or on-chain agent-related apps from big players like A16Z and Y Combinator. My understanding is that VR is kind of like the become almost the undesired one. Space is is hot right now. Hardware, AI, of course, certain parts of crypto. So maybe there's an asymmetric bet there. I mean, you know what? Since this is a crypto DeFi podcast, there probably are. I'm sure there's some cryptos that play into that. Maybe some Metaverse project where they raised a bunch of money in 2021. They've been heads down building since then. Like I'm sure there's a team like that out there that exists. Maybe this is a time for asymmetry. People might not remember if they just got into crypto this cycle. They might not remember that like AI cryptos were like kind of a joke for a long time before ChatGPT came out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because it was like, it was like, oh yeah, we're building crypto for AI. It'd be like, you'd see memes about it. It'd be like, like how many buzzwords can you throw into one thing?
That's right.
And then suddenly ChatGPT comes out. You have Midjourney. You've got all these AI applications, and suddenly, those people are no longer such a joke when the price 10x's in 1 month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's talk about AIs for like just a brief moment. The agentic narrative, according to Cato, which I love, shout out to Cato, has taken over a lot of the mind share of Twitter. Now, I in the comments often get spammed by some of these agentic agents, and I'm not sure if that's the right parlay or parlance. And they're terrible. Like they're not good at writing. They're not very compelling. They're not particularly funny. A lot of them are just like, it's clearly bots, but with like some programmed personality. There are some standouts and some standout use cases that I think are fascinating, but I'd like to get your take on, because, I don't forget it was Cato or someone else talking about Cato, but they were saying that like, the KOL is an endangered species because these agentic AIs, they're going to take over what KOLs do now. And I just was completely unconvinced after looking at the quality of content being produced by these things. With one exception, which I'll mention.
One exception. Well, I'll tell you, I don't know what your exception is. I will say, I actually think AIXBT has some interesting stuff. Yeah, which I think is why it's done so well. Like that one actually, I'll be honest, some of the analysis is actually good info. It's up-to-date info, and I think the analysis is like a solid summary like that on what you might expect like an analyst to produce, maybe like a young analyst. But I think, I don't know if KOL space is dead. I know that Naval, for example, recently tweeted out that like if you're a creator, you don't have to worry about AI. Now, I don't know if he meant content creator or just someone who creates things like more as like the broad like creators versus consumers type thing. But I will say, I think it's commoditizing a certain type of content. Low effort threads, I think between AI and large numbers of users from, parts of the world with very low average salaries, I think that it's become, there's no longer a lot of sort of edge in creating those kinds of threads to grow on Twitter. It's like race to the bottom. And I think you see that also with the quality of those threads, where it's very tough to find good ones now. The ones that do well tend to be like not very good, in my opinion. I think that what is going to happen is a lot of these AI tools are going to let people who are good and understand how to play into human emotions and how to actually make things that are compelling and know, like, Ben Affleck had this great talk where he said, like, what AI is bad at is knowing when to stop, like knowing what to cut out to actually make something appealing. And so his take on this, which I actually agree with, is that it's going to make people who are good at producing things able to produce much more. And it's going to allow people with fewer resources to do it for cheaper. So actually, I think, even though it's not, he was talking about Hollywood movies, I think it's actually worth reading. Also, Ben Affleck, like, smart guy. People don't know that. Like, he was the youngest person to ever win what's it called? The what's the one they give to people who write movies, like best screenplay?
Oh yeah. Was that for
Good Will
Good Will Hunting? Yeah.
Yeah, it was like he was 25, the youngest person to ever win for that. So like actually, like, you know, smart guy before being an actor, but he was saying that, so what might happen instead is you have a small team that can compete with a Hollywood studio, because they can use these tools to, like, you know, very cheaply make up visual effects in a way that would have been tough otherwise. I'll tell you personally, one way I'm doing it is I use this app called Opus that will cut long videos into shorts. And it's gone from being like, oh, this is kind of cool, but not really usable a few months ago, to now it's like, okay, this is on par with a you know, cheap to mid-tier editor. Yeah, like it's on par with a Fiverr editor, which, you know, then fast forward another 6 months, it'll probably be even better. But it's like, okay, it's on par with a Fiverr editor. I'm actually going to use these now. And some of them they're not going to go viral, but like some of them are getting enough views that it's actually worth it to post. And I think you're going to see a lot more things like that, where people who know what they're doing can do more. And, you know, for example, people talk about, you already have some AI influencers and types of things like that out there. Someone is still creating that. Like faceless videos have been a thing for longer. AI makes it easier to make them, because now you don't need to pay someone for a voiceover. Now you can use 11. But at the end of the day, there's still someone behind the keyboard, and maybe instead of having one faceless channel, now they have 10.
Right. And even if there's like an AI creating the content, someone created that AI who created the content. Like, it's not turtles all the way down. It might be turtles for a long time, but then there's a person at the end of that. Someone is creative. Yeah.
And I think there's also, you know, some aspect of there becomes a premium on things becoming more human. You know, something I've realized is like, okay,
Sure.
So just doing explanations is probably more difficult now. That's easier to produce with AI, but it's much tougher to produce like a personality that people can relate to. Maybe that'll change eventually.
100%. I was going to talk about customer service, and there are two sort of angles here. One is I would always prefer a person over the automated non-AI, just like press a button to do this and like, I can't stand those. I find myself yelling person, people, human at my phone whenever that happens. But the next question is, would you prefer a sophisticated AI to an outsourced call center in some country where maybe the English level competency isn't particularly high, their desire to help you is not particularly high, their own, like, you know, what I'm saying is there an AI you'd prefer to a person in any situation? I think that there might be.
I would say I prefer to a person when it's a routine issue that there's an easy fix for.
Right.
The problem is, like, the problem is if you get to a point where there's like, it's like an AI circular hellhole with no human at the end. And I can think of situations, for example, this was years ago, but I was doing something with having an issue with Facebook ads back when I was running those in a previous life. And they had automated responses to everything. And it was like, just kept bringing me back. Like, it got to a point where it was a loop where it was referring me to this other thing. And then
that was me in Twitter when I lost my account last year.
Yeah, to something else. And at some point I was like, I need a human on the phone so I can explain this issue, because you know, this bot is not, for whatever reason, is not helping me. And so it's like, there's just no human at the end of the tunnel. And so that, you know, the problem is if it gets that way everywhere, then that's obviously a subpar experience.
Also,
but
AIs
if it's something,
don't have guilt. They have, you know, there's no capacity to feel guilt. So they might be really happy with an unsatisfied customer as long as the issue is resolved and they're not going to have a callback. Whereas a person might go the extra mile.
I think companies that use it well, and I've noticed several companies recently that actually had markedly improved customer service that seem to be using this well, was basically using the AI to triage customer complaints, where things that can be solved by the AI get triage there, and you don't need to have a human on the phone, but then the people who actually need a person can get them faster because they're not clogged up like resetting a password.
North Carolina, the government here uses AI on like their tax paying, the NC.gov paying like property taxes and paying car taxes and all that. You'll go on, there'll be this little text window. You'll explain your situation. They'll say, "Are you talking about this?" And you'll say, "Yeah." And they'll just ask you a bunch of questions. And they'll say, "Okay, well, here's your bill." And you can just pay it like that. And it's through plain text interaction. It's phenomenal. That is, in my opinion, one of the best uses of AI, because I don't need a person for that. I need a person for when they've overcharged me or undercharged me, or like there's some technical issue where I need to speak to a human. But for things like that, it's like the DMV could be an AI, and I would be stoked about that. I think that would be fantastic in most cases.
Yeah, I think the other thing that AI really excels for, if we're talking about that, and maybe we're getting on a little bit of a tangent, but I think the other thing it excels for is turning like fuzzy answers into categories. So you could call it, explain an issue, and then it could say, okay, this relates to this topic. Here are the key points. This Boolean is going to be a yes, and so on, and then pass that on to someone who, rather than having this like, frantic call recording, and now they've actually got a spreadsheet of exactly what the issue is, and it can be forwarded to the right person.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of this because I lost furnace broke last night, and it's sub 10 degrees here. So, so I had to call one of those emergency numbers, and it took it was pretty good, but took a few hours to get back, as I'm sure happens during our cold spell.
Right.
And I was like, I was like, okay, this could be something like you call this message, and then like an AI could very quickly parse what was in this call and get it to the right person.
And also, this is one thing that's kind of terrifying, but also potentially rank these things by levels of severity, or like rank them by levels of emergency might not be the right word, but importance. Pros and cons there, obviously, because you could always game ways to get pushed to the top of the stack, but you can do that with humans as well, which is what I do want to end this with a couple yields, because I would feel remiss if I didn't at least give people a few opportunities after listening to us wax lyrical on AI for a bit to generate some returns. Not financial advice. Don't get mad at me. I was I'm not going to talk about that, but there is one that has popped up that I mentioned yesterday on X. I'll finally call it X, even though it pains me to do so, which was Resolve. Resolve, which I think is coming to Pendle soon. Resolve is an Athena competitor, and I was pretty stoked to find out about them. I don't know how they flew under the radar. They blew up from like single-digit millions to over 100 million TVL almost overnight, over a few quick weeks. They have a market on Euler, and I was looking at them and I was like, okay, there's a 57% APR to lend USDC to this market, this Resolve market for USR. Why? Utilization was at 97%. I said, okay, it's probably a very thin market. $10 million lent. So it's not that thin of a market. It's a relatively robust market for Euler. So I was looking into it. What people are doing is they're farming the airdrop. So, usual money airdrop was a home run for anyone who did that. I mean, multiple hundreds of percents of APRs if you were in the Pendle play for USD 0++, which I can't stand saying. Then you made a 5x to 10x of your principal for the YTs, which is has been a rarity recently. Right now, you can just go lend USDC to these airdrop speculation maxis for 50 to 57% APR on USDC, no leverage involved, which is fantastic. But then I posted about this, and Spectra, which is a Pendle competitor, posted in my comments and said, hey, you can literally get a fixed rate, fixed date PT-esque yield on Spectra, which used to be AP wine for the OGs, the interest rate swapping OGs out there on Spectra, 50%. So if you are looking for a fixed rate, fixed date yield similar to Pendle PTs, I love Pendle, by the way. I'm not trying to shill any of their competitors. Spectra right now, and I was looking even for a 6-figure size principal, fixed APY, 50% APR on USR, which blew my mind, which is just absolutely incredible for stablecoin yield. Now, my next question is, when is that going to be composable? When can I leverage it and loop it? But of course, all things in good time. So that's my sort of yield shill. What do you think, and do you have one?
Do I have a yield shill? No, I was just I was distracted because Bitcoin's been crashing. I just saw while we've been recording. But yeah,
where's it at?
Down, it's down to,
don't say 92
around
or less.
90. It's right around 93.
Okay, all right, I can live with that.
Okay, yeah, you can live with that. I mean, it's not below where it was a few days ago. I mean,
my
it's still,
thesis is that holiday seasons are just going to be pain, because historically, I don't know why, just historically during the holidays we get pain.
It's like the summer, right? It's like a summer in the winter. Well,
yeah, it's like a summer in the winter.
Dumb. That sounds dumb, but you understand what I mean if sell in May and go away, which is almost always the case.
Yeah,
summer in the winter, and I thought it was Sailor's blackout period, but apparently he bought more Bitcoin at 106,000.
Well, that was a week ago, so like a few months in.
It was a week ago.
crypto
Yeah,
time.
but I was looking. There were like 12 hours where it was above that price.
Jeez.
Maybe it's different OTC, right? Maybe it's different than
Yeah, let's hope so.
wherever he's buying it. Let's hope so. No, I don't have a I don't have a yield chill today. Just been focused on trying to find sort of which narratives have the most legs as we go into the next year.
Give me a narrative shill.
A narrative shill. Okay, I'll tell you my narrative shills. First off, I know it's maybe a bit overplayed, but I think we're already getting a nice correction on this. Is on-chain agents, I actually think, have the best potential to be a breakout sector of the cycle where you see multiple rise to be like parity with top DeFi applications in terms of market cap. I think it's just it's got phenomenal narrative behind it. It's easily understandable to new people coming in. You've got A16Z, in their request for startups mentioning on-chain agents, and you've got it's one of those things. If you look at, for example, look at GitHub, look at trending repositories. The AI16Z, so not A16Z, AI16Z ELIZA framework was the #1 monthly trending repository on GitHub. So you have a lot of developers who are not previously in crypto coming in specifically to experiment with these on-chain agents. And I think it's inevitable that, you have most of these dumb Twitter bots right now. I think AIXBT is pretty good, but you're going to see actually people start to develop things that are more useful. So to me, that's a narrative I'll shill. I actually think that PerpDEX's time has come as well. So that's I'll give you two narratives. I'll also give you PerpDEX's. I think PerpDEX's time has come. I think that's HyperLiquid is one sign of that, but I don't think it's the end by a long shot. It's still only a few percentage points of total perp market share.
Are there any other PerpDEXs you would say are going to benefit from this maybe season or cycle or narrative?
Well, I always say if they're not going to specialize in something, usually the leader is the way to go.
Mm-hmm. Right.
HyperLiquid has the most volume by far. It's the only one with over $1 billion in the past 24 hours of PerpDEXs. Going down the list, Sin Futures and Jupiter. I don't know as much about Sin Futures. Both of those are, those are 2 and 3 right now. I'll say this: someone else is going to benefit. I don't have a call on who it is.
Sure,
if that makes sense. But someone else will benefit.
Maybe they're heads down building right now. We'll find out next week.
Yeah, exactly.
Patrick, this has been phenomenal, fantastic. Thank you so much for your never-ending alpha, and everyone else. Just have a wonderful Christmas season. I will say, if the price is paining you, deleverage, go outside, play a bit, come back in 2025, and then we'll resume up only.
Love it. Guys. Thank you, Steven. It's been a pleasure.